welcome. Let me introduce myself. My name is Brenda Mejia, and I am a researcher at the Marine and Coastal Research Institute in BEMAR in Colombia. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the first webinar of the Regional Capacity Development Program on Coastal Water Quality Monitoring and Management. This program is funded by the United Nations Environment Program and is implemented by INVEMAR as the regional implementing partner. I would like to warmly welcome all of you and thank you for joining us today. We are delighted to have participants from across the wider Caribbean region joining us for the first session. And this webinar is so important because it marks the beginning of a monthly series designed to strengthen technical capacities, promote knowledge exchange, and support more harmonized approaches to coastal water quality monitoring and management throughout the region. Today's session is entitled Core Coastal Water Quality Parameters, specifically what to measure, why it matters, and its role in decision making. Before we begin, let me show you today's agenda. Our webinar is organized into 4 main parts. So first, we will start with a brief introduction to the webinar series and the objectives of today's session. Next, we will begin with our first presentation, the introduction to the SOCAR framework, objectives and relevance for regional reporting, all of this with the SOCAR framework. This presentation will provide the regional context for today's topic and explain how coastal water quality monitoring supports environmental assessment across the wider Caribbean region. Following that, we will move into our main technical presentation on the core coastal water quality parameters, where we will discuss the key physical, chemical, biological, and microbiological indicators used in coastal monitoring programs. And we will then hear a practical case study illustrating the application of these parameters within a regional monitoring program. Finally, we will reserve time to questions and discussion before closing today's webinar and sharing information about the upcoming sessions in this webinar series. Throughout the webinar, please feel free to submit your questions using only the Zoom chat, please. So keep your microphones off. We will collect all the questions and our panelists will answer as soon as possible. And okay, first to begin, it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Maria Nariño, who will provide an introduction to the SOCAR framework, its objectives, and its relevance for regional coastal water quality assessment and reporting. So, Maria, go ahead. Welcome.
Thanks, Brenda, and thank you everyone to be here with us to join us today. So, good morning. Good morning. My name is Maria Jose Nariño. I'm a research scientist at Columbia Institute for Marine and Coastal Research in BEMAR. It is a pleasure to be here today to introduce SOCAR. So today I really want to introduce what is SOCAR and discuss like why it is important for our region. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Thanks, Brenda. So before we talk about all the parameters used to monitor coastal water quality, I really would like to us to consider a very simple question. So why coastal water quality matters? Or why do we need to monitor water quality? If you think about this question, the answer that we can have is beyond measuring physical and chemical parameters. Like the healthy coastal water sustain coral reefs, seagrass beds, mangroves, and many other ecosystems. And all of these ecosystems support the biodiversity, the food security, the coastal protection, and also the human will. So with all of these like environments and ecosystems, are very important for all of us because they can help us for the livelihoods of the millions of people throughout to our region. So all of these different like ecosystems are gonna play an essential role in the key economic activities, in this case like fisheries, tourism, and also like the wider blue economy. So for this reason, this slide can illustrate many of the activities that is taking place on the land and generate pollutants that eventually reach the coastal waters. In this case, we can have wastewater, nutrient, plastics, and other contaminants that can affect the marine ecosystem and reduce the benefits that they can provide to our societies. So for this region, monitoring water quality gonna allow us not only to detect the environmental changes, but also to identify the pressures causing them and provide evidence for effective management decision. Is because the countries of the wider Caribbean region share one interconnected marine environment, so we also need a reliable and comparable information at a regional level. Is this the specific reason? Because we need or we develop SOCAR. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Before we discussing the report itself to see what specifically is SOCAR, it's important to understand the geographical area being assessed. In this case is the Cartagena Convention area. As you can see in the screen, they cover the entire wider Caribbean region and includes 28 countries and 18 overseas territories located around the Caribbean Sea, the Gulf of Mexico, and part of the Atlantic Ocean also. If you can see in this table, we're gonna have like 4 layers of marine ecosystem. In this case, we're gonna have the first one, a subregion named Gulf, the second one, the Western Caribbean, the third one, the Southern Caribbean, and also like the Southern Caribbean area. But the main marine ecosystem that we're gonna have is the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean Sea, the North Brazil Shelf, and the southeast of the US continental shelf. Although we belong to different countries, we share one interconnected marine system. The ocean currents, the major rivers, and the ecological processes connect all the entire region. So this means that pollution generated in one location, for example, if something happened in Colombia, eventually can affect the ecosystem and communities located hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away. Because this region is, because this, so this is the reason because we have like the Cartagena Convention area as one interconnected system. And we go to the next slide. So, for many years, countries across the wider Caribbean developed their own national monitoring programs. For this reason, we need to understand why was SOCAR created and what's gonna come next. In this case, all the information that we have in all of our different countries, like I said before, we have 28 countries that are part of the Cartagena Convention area. All this information, it's normally often like scattered, the methodologies differ among the countries, and it's really difficult to build a consistent regional picture of marine environmental quality. This is particularly challenging because land-based pollution crosses national boundaries, like I said before, with currents, for example. So addressing this before requires coordinating monitoring, comparable information, and regional cooperation. As you can see in this timeline, this process began not today. This process started with the Cartagena Convention and was later strengthened through the LBS protocol. And in 2010, the contracted parties requested the development of SOCAR, as the first and regional assessment was published in 2019. So for that reason, like SOCAR transformed like national monitoring data and other scientific information into a shared regional assessment that could support environmental decision and coordinated action. And this process is now moving forward to the next SOCAR that is expected to be held in 2029. And the plan of this is provide a more integrated assessment by linking marine pollution with the condition of the coastal habitats and ecosystem. But what exactly is SOCAR and how this is for the region? So the meaning of SOCAR, as you can see in the screen, is the state of the Cartagena Convention area report, and is the first regional assessment of the state of the marine environment in relation to pollution from land-based sources and activities. Its main purpose is to provide a scientific, periodic, and regional assessment that supports environmental decision-making. So for that reason, the vision that we have for the SOCAR is an authoritative regional assessment that supports decision-making and promotes action to reduce land-based pollution. And the objectives that we're gonna have for the SOCAR is like establish a regional baseline, assess environmental status and trends, support national and regional reporting, inform policies and investment, and support the implementation of the Cartagena Convention and the LBS protocol. To be able to prepare all this report, the information from multiple sources was integrated in the first time that the report was done. So in this case, this includes information for monitoring data, submitting for different countries, environmental models, global databases, and published scientific information that it's available in internet. Together with all of these resources, made it possible to establish a regional baseline for water quality across the wider Caribbean region. However, a regional report also requires a common framework that allows this information to be integrated in a consistent way. So, for that reason, to organize and interpret this information, SOCAR used the DFCR framework and the core water quality indicators. This framework helps us to understand the relationship between the human activities and the condition of the environment. First of all, we're going to have like the drivers. So the drivers can be like the human activities, can generate environmental pressures such as urban growth or population, agriculture or industry, for example. Next, we need to examine the pressures, including in this case, the nutrient inputs and the wastewater discharges. Next, we need to see how this pressure can modify the state of the environment, particularly in the water quality. So this is the main point that we're gonna talk today, the state part of the framework. So in this case, when all the environmental conditions change, the impacts may occur. So this can include biodiversity loss, eutrophication, ecosystem degradation, and the different economic consequences. Finally, the framework considers response, such as public policies, monitoring programs, management actions, and pollution control measures. Within this process, the water quality indicators play a fundamental role because they allow us to measure environmental condition like objective. In this case, we're going to have, like for the presentation of today, we're going to have 8 key indicators. So if we can go to the next slide, please. The key indicator that I was telling you before, it's going to be presented for the next speaker. So for this short presentation, I don't going to really go deep in that part. So in this case, one of the SOCAR greatest strengths is its ability to transform monitoring data in useful information for different users. As you can see, SOCAR can be used for researchers, for NGOs, for private sector, government agencies, donors, regional organizations, communities, countries, and obviously also for the scientists. So in this case, in other words, like SOCAR transformed all the scientific information into a practical tool that supports environmental management, regional cooperation, and evidence-based decision-making. Can we go to the next slide? And to conclude my presentation, I want to say that when we create the first SOCAR, we also learn so many things. And one of the things is we have like limited country participation and even spatial coverage. I mean that we only have like 16 countries that submitted monitoring data, and we don't receive any information from the sub-region too. We also see that we have a limited time series, so many of the datasets covered only 1 year or short monitoring periods, or in this case, sometimes we only have like a specific project, so we only have data for one project and that's all. And also we see that the data quality and the standardization is one of the huge challenges that we have, because different monitoring methodologies, because different countries have different monitoring methodologies, and this is like really like difficult to be able to standardize all the information that we can get. Also, like the harmonized sampling and reporting protocols are really, really different. So to be able like to harmonize all of this information, we are trying to create like this webinar series to try to teach the people, to try to understand what is SOCAR, why we need to report, and what is the best way to do it. For this reason, this lesson gonna directly inform like the ongoing regional efforts to strengthen the monitoring capacities and improve the environmental reporting across the wider Caribbean region. So I'm done with this presentation, Brenda.
Okay, thank you very much, Maria, for providing that valuable introduction to the SOCAR framework. So keeping in mind the regional context, we will now move into the core topic of today's webinar. It's now my pleasure to introduce Hala Saheli, who will guide us through the core coastal water quality parameters used in monitoring programs across the wider Caribbean region. During this presentation, we will learn what these parameters measure, why they are important, and how that parameters are supporting environmental decision making today. So Hala Saheli, thank you for being with us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Brenda. Hi, everybody. Welcome to everybody. My name is Dr. Hala Saheli. I'm currently the senior technical consultant working on this project, which is a capacity development on water quality project in the wider Caribbean region, which has been, as Brenda noted earlier, funded by the US EPA and executed by the UNEP Cartagena Convention Secretariat. And just to introduce a little bit, I think Brenda did that for me. Thanks, Brenda. But this first sort of module is going to focus on these core water quality parameters, what they are, why they matter, where they come from, and how they connect to, different types of outcomes, ecological outcomes, public health outcomes. I'd like, as much as possible, for the emphasis to be sort of practical. And by the end, I hope that you, our participants, should be able to look at monitoring results and ask yourself, okay, what pressure might this indicate? Or, what ecosystem response, might follow after I get these types of results? And ultimately, what type of management decision does this evidence support? And so I'll begin with the purpose of monitoring, before I move into sort of the individual parameters. So why do we monitor coastal water quality? There are four linked reasons why we do this. First, we want to understand the current condition of the water body. Are we starting from a healthy or from a stressed or degraded state? And secondly, so you want to establish that sort of baseline, right? You want to understand. Secondly, we seek to identify or detect changes over time, including, trends after hurricanes or after, major weather events and episodic pollution events. Third, we seek to manage. Monitoring should generate evidence for planning, for permitting, for investments, in various interventions like wastewater treatment, for land use decisions, and coastal protection. And finally, we wish to evaluate. Once measures are implemented, monitoring tells us whether they're actually working, like whether they're improving conditions, or whether we need to make adjustments. We need to be adaptive about the way that we're managing these water bodies. So a useful way to frame this is that monitoring turns observation into, accountability, in a sense, into action. It connects environmental status to human pressures and as a result, policy responses, what we can do to make a difference. So with that purpose in mind, let's look at the main pollution pressures that coastal monitoring is trying to detect. I think a lot of you would know this, but in our region, a central point is that the coastal water quality is strongly shaped by land-based activities, what's happening on the land. Many of you are familiar with ridge to reef approaches and these types of things. So this slide really highlights this. We know generally that, about 80% of marine pollution originates from land-based sources of pollution, land-based sources. This matters because the solution is not only in the sea, right? It's not only in the coastal zone, in the coastal, like in the waters, it's in the watersheds. It's in agricultural systems, it's in sanitation, wastewater systems, and coastal development and planning. We know, of course, that agricultural runoff is a non-point source of pollution. It's coming from sort of all over, from a diffuse source. It moves fertilizers, pesticides, sediments through rainfall, into our, through rivers and guts, we call it guts in the, gullies in the Eastern Caribbean, through surface runoff into our coastal zone, into our nearshore waters. Domestic wastewater is a point source. We know sort of exactly where it's coming from. We generally know where the outfall is, and remains one of the main anthropogenic, like human sources in the region, of this type of pollution, especially where wastewater is untreated or only partially treated. And then coastal development, hotel developments. We know that many of our countries rely heavily on the tourism sector, adds another layer, to this sources of pollution, through dredging, mangrove loss, construction, urbanization. And this can also increase, of course, sedimentation, which is kind of the input of sediments into the nearshore waters, and habitat stress. So the parameters in the next slide are selected because they help us detect these pressures and their ecological consequences. So this, this whole module, it's going to focus on these core parameters that you see on the screen that are relevant to the LBS protocol and to the SOCAR, sort of framework and reporting that Maria Jose explained to us earlier. We can group these parameters into sort of 4 categories. First, there are nutrients, dissolved inorganic nitrogen, or DIN, sometimes abbreviated by DIN, dissolved inorganic phosphorus, DIP. And these indicate nutrient enrichment, a lot of nutrients in your water. And the second one in this category is chlorophyll A, which tells us how phytoplankton biomass, so phytoplankton are these sort of tiny microorganisms in our waters, how the biomass, how they're growing, how they're responding to these nutrients. The next category is sort of physical chemical parameters such as pH, dissolved oxygen, turbidity. These might be more, ones that you'd be familiar with, of course. And these describe the chemical and physical conditions that organisms in your water column and ecosystems, are experiencing. And the last category are microbiological indicators such as E. coli and Enterococcus species. And these help assess whether there's fecal contamination and, of course, associated public health and ecological health risks. So the point is not to treat each parameter in isolation. Their real value comes from reading them or understanding them together as a pattern of pressure, exposure, and then response by your ecosystem. So we're going to start with nitrogen, which is one of the main drivers of nutrient enrichment. Dissolved inorganic nitrogen, DIN, is a pool of bioavailable, so organisms can readily kind of take this in, bioavailable nitrogen compounds that are dissolved in the water, mainly in 3 forms: ammonia, nitrate, and nitrite. And these forms of nitrogen are essential nutrients for aquatic life, and actually even for all types of life. But excess input, so way too much nutrients, can shift a system from just regular type of productivity and growth into imbalance, like something that's just completely out of whack. So we measure DIN because it indicates nutrient enrichment. It helps assess eutrophication risk. Eutrophication is when there are just too many nutrients in the water, and this causes excess growth of algae, which is generally something you wouldn't want, and it reduces oxygen that's available for all these other species, in your water column, aquatic life, fish. And yeah, so that's what eutrophication is. The ecological concern is that elevated DIN can stimulate phytoplankton growth. And when the organic matter later decomposes, oxygen is consumed. And so your dissolved oxygen will fall. I'm going to cover that a little bit more later. So DIN is often an early pressure indicator before the full ecosystem response becomes sort of visible, right? Like the canary in the coal mine sort of thing. So a practical interpretation question you can ask yourself is nitrogen elevated relative to the baseline? So you would ask yourself this question, as you collect this data, is it changing? Is it changing for different sites, depending when you're moving to different stations? Is it changing because of the season, the dry season versus the wet season? Does it coincide with other signals, other signs, such as chlorophyll A, which we're going to cover next, after this one, after phosphorus, or, changes in dissolved oxygen? So nitrogen is only part of this story. So phosphorus is next, in a sort of companion parameter, right? Dissolved inorganic phosphorus is the bioavailable form of phosphorus, which is mainly orthophosphate. like nitrogen, it's necessary for aquatic organisms. But excess phosphorus in this case, can contribute just the same way as nitrogen to algae growth and imbalance, in your ecosystem. We measure DIP to identify phosphorus enrichment, to assess eutrophication potential, and to interpret kind of the dynamics, how are nutrients changing. And its sources include agricultural fertilizers, wastewater discharges, just like nitrogen. The main difference is that detergents are often a big form of DIP. And other sources are surface runoff, industrial discharges. So the important point is that the ecological response depends not only on the absolute concentration of phosphorus, but also how the phosphorus is relating to the nitrogen, right? This sort of combination of both of them. And also, how they're entering the water, how the water circulates, how much time are they residing in the water, and how much light is there. So in management terms, DIP and DIN together help determine whether nutrient control should focus on, wastewater, agriculture, stormwater, or a combination, most likely a combination, of course, of these pressures. So once nutrients increase, we then need to know whether the biological community, like the things that are alive in your water, are responding. How are they responding? And this is where chlorophyll A becomes important. And this is the next slide. Yeah, chlorophyll A is and maybe this is one that we may not be as familiar with. Personally, I came from a background where we were mostly monitoring, say, potable water, and we generally wouldn't monitor for chlorophyll A. But in a marine and coastal area, we do want to monitor for chlorophyll A. It's an important ecosystem response indicator. And what is it? It's a pigment, a photosynthetic, so it responds to light, pigment inside of phytoplankton. And as I noted earlier, phytoplankton are tiny, plant-like organisms that float in the water, and they use sunlight to produce food and oxygen, a very, very important part of the sort of chain of life that happens in an aquatic environment. Chlorophyll A is commonly used as a proxy for phytoplankton and how much there is. So this makes it very useful because it shows whether nutrient enrichment is translating into biological productivity. So unlike nutrients, chlorophyll A is not discharged directly from a pipe or from the pollution source. It increases when conditions allow phytoplankton to grow, especially when there are a lot of nutrients and where light and temperature and the time that these are all inside of the water, the residence time, support like growth and proliferation. So high chlorophyll A generally indicates excessive phytoplankton growth, possible, harmful blooms or like overgrowth of algae, and later, of course, oxygen depletion as this biomass decomposes. So chlorophyll A helps us move from understanding the pressure to the response in the ecosystem. If DIN or DIP are elevated, but chlorophyll A is not, we might ask ourselves, okay, well, what's limiting the growth of these organisms? And if all three are elevated, well, we have very strong evidence that eutrophication risk is going to become, much higher. So the next parameter is turbidity, and turbidity basically affects how much light, this is a very important part of the whole kind of if you go back to high school biology, photosynthesis, right? So turbidity affects how much light is available for biological response and for these habitats, these benthic habitats where the aquatic organisms are living. So turbidity measures the loss of water clarity caused by suspended particles, sediments, and organic matter. It's important because coastal ecosystems depend on light. Coral, seagrasses, and other benthic organisms are especially sensitive to sustained turbidity and sedimentation. We measure turbidity to detect suspended solids, to understand about erosion, runoff, impacts from dredging, and other types of pollution events. So these can come from, all sorts of places: agriculture, dredging, industrial discharges, coastal development, and urban runoff. And there are two major consequences. First, it reduces light penetration, and it can limit photosynthesis. And of course, these suspended particles can also carry contaminants, including nutrients, metals, which we're not going to speak about today, and microbes, microbiological sort of organisms. So how do you interpret this? High turbidity should trigger questions about, okay, well, what's happened? Has there been very heavy rainfall? In areas where you have guts or gullies, like in smaller countries like St. Kitts and Nevis, how are the rivers discharging? Is it more or less? Construction, dredging, so all of high turbidity should make you ask these kinds of questions, about how you sampled and what's the timing, what's happening on the land. So when nutrients and organic matter increase, and when light and decomposition, dynamics change, this is where dissolved oxygen becomes a critical indicator. So dissolved oxygen is the oxygen available in the water for aquatic organisms, just like how it is in air for us. It's one of the clearest indicators of ecosystem health, because fish, invertebrates, and all types of, all microorganisms depend on adequate oxygen for respiration. So we measure DO, dissolved oxygen, because it reflects the balance between oxygen production, consumption, mixing, temperature, and how organic matter in the water is decomposing. Wastewater, excessive nutrients, so, it's kind of like a common script here. Biodegradable organic matter, aquaculture, urban runoff, all these can increase the demand for oxygen in your water column. When oxygen drops, organisms experience stress, and severe depletion can produce, what they call hypoxic or anoxic conditions. This is where basically there's no more oxygen available. And this, can result in fish kills, invertebrates can die, and just, overall massive changes to the ecosystem structure. The timing of the measurement matters. So often this is something you're going to measure in the field. You wouldn't necessarily take the sample in a bottle and take back to the lab, because dissolved oxygen varies, daily based on photosynthesis and respiration, and it also varies seasonally with temperature and stratification. A single value is useful, but repeated measurements, would give you more information about the risk. Okay, so alongside oxygen, pH, which is the next one, tells us about the chemical balance of the water and the conditions for organisms, such as corals, especially, and other types of shell-forming species. So pH measures acidity and or alkalinity based on hydrogen ion concentrations. Marine waters are normally slightly alkaline, around 7.8 to 8.3. But of course, it can vary depending on the local conditions. We measure pH because it affects water chemistry, biological processes, and contaminant behavior. Changes in pH may reflect, again, all of the, common culprits throughout each slide. Industrial discharges, wastewater inputs, agricultural runoff. And another added one is sort of broader effects of increasing atmospheric carbon dioxide. This is, from basically climate change, basically, right? Carbon dioxide going into the air from fossil fuel combustion. And these generally will then, dissolve into our oceans and cause ocean acidification. Maybe we'll have a webinar on this later on. But ecologically, pH shifts, and it affects the growth and reproduction. It can cause sort of coral reefs to degrade, because coral reefs are made up of, calcium and these things that are very easily affected when waters become acidic. It can increase the solubility and toxicity of some metals. So, if you've got metals coming into your water column from industrial discharges, if your pH balance is shifting, some of these metals will become more toxic, and overall alters, ecosystem functioning. So for monitoring, generally we would monitor pH alongside temperature and salinity and alkalinity. and local baseline conditions. Yeah. So the final parameter in this group, we're going to shift from ecosystem condition to how this could possibly impact human health risk. And this is where we talk about fecal indicator bacteria. So E. coli and Enterococcus species are fecal indicator bacteria. They are not the only organisms that we worry about, but generally they help us assess whether fecal contamination has occurred, and whether it's present, and whether recreational users, people who are swimming, on our beaches or bathing, may face increased health risks. So E. coli is common in the intestines of humans and warm-blooded animals. So it could be coming from human waste or agricultural livestock waste. Enterococci are especially useful because in marine waters, because they're more resistant to environmental conditions. So where E. coli you might not be able to find it in the marine environment, you would find Enterococci species. And so this is really giving you an indication that you've had some type of fecal contamination. So again, this helps us to identify if there are any failures of wastewater treatment systems. It helps us to assess recreational water quality, of course, which is very important for our countries in the wider Caribbean region. And it guides public health, decisions, whether you close beaches, in that sort of, those types of decisions as well. And we understand all of the sources, but we also have other sources such as, discharges from vessels, like boats and cruise ships, etc. And high indicator counts, of course, suggest higher likelihood of pathogens such as bacteria, viruses, protozoa, and increased risk of gastrointestinal, skin, eye, and ear infections. So to close, this will be my last slide. This is where I'd like to try to connect some of these ideas. So to connect the individual parameters into sort of a pathway from pressure to ecosystem response. So it brings it all together. The pathway begins with nutrient enrichment and increased turbidity, right? DIN and DIP tell us about nutrient pressure, while turbidity tells us about suspended particles, runoff, and reduced clarity. These pressures can lead to phytoplankton growth, which we track with chlorophyll A. As the phytoplankton increases and suspended particles are reducing the amount of light that's entering into our water column, the system can shift, the balance will shift. Less light affects seagrass, coral, mangrove, benthic organisms, and more organic matter will then eventually decompose, consuming the dissolved oxygen that's in that water. And if the oxygen falls too far, the system can enter hypoxia or anoxia and lead to stress, mortality, and broader sort of degradation of our ecosystem. This is why the parameters are most powerful as an integrated set. A single measurement gives information, but a pattern gives us more like a diagnosis, for thinking like doctors in a sense. Repeated patterns over time gives us trends. And as a manager, I know some of you are managers that are in on the call today, trends give managers the evidence needed to prioritize action, evaluate interventions, and report with confidence. And so I'd like to close by emphasizing the sort of practical takeaway that coastal monitoring is not only a sort of technical exercise, it's an early warning system that links land-based pressures to ecological health, public health, and policy response. So yes, so please feel free to pop your questions in the chat, and I'm passing it back to Brenda. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Hala, for that excellent presentation. We have now explored the scientific basis of the core coastal water quality parameters. And to complement this overview, we will now hear about the practical application through a regional case study. It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Paola Obando. During this presentation, she will share a practical experience in implementing coastal water quality monitoring programs and highlight with examples from the Colombia region. Paola, excuse me, welcome. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Brenda. Eh, Good morning from Colombia. It's an honor for me to be here and for the opportunity to share our experiences through the Monitor and Network. I'm Paolo Bondo. I'm environmental engineer, registered environmental management and marine and coastal systems. And in this moment, I'm the head of the research lines of evaluation and monitoring marine environmental quality with functions in the analyzed data and the coordination with the REDCA. So the next slide, please, Brenda. So welcome for this talk about the Surveillance Network for Conservation and Protection of Marine and Coastal Waters of Colombia, called in Spanish REDCAN. The work team, we have so many researchers, master degree, PhD, and as speakers, we have about the analyzed data for the all literature. So this is how, to the natural importance for Colombian coastal ecosystems, for the Caribbean and the Pacifics, we have multiple ecosystem service, and they offer the need to protect and conserve the width of the data that support decision making, the national monitor programs developments, and where the needs with what was work in 2001. REDCAN is an institutional network that coordinates, collects, systematizes, and analyzes information about the quality of marine and coastal waters and sediments in Colombia. So the points we have on highlight network, we have 25 years of operation. So that is a huge, more than 300 modernization distributed on the Caribbean, the coast, on the Pacific coast, has more than 600,000 environmental records, as a pioneer information system available of the public good. Also, REDCAN has prepared 14 training courses of the different topics, so straight capacities of the environmental activities in Colombia, and other topics in the region. We have other projects with the cooperation and others only on the Caribbean, but in the Pacific same. Throughout REDCAN, we have experience and purpose database, administration, and information visualization, starting for the data collection, pacing to the bulk of the tables, to apply servers, finally the information deliveries of the users. This database was work with Oracle stores and information more than 2,000 records, and we have all experiences with the integrated information, other so many topics and so many the structures we have in the marine quality and sediments and other parameters we have your interest to your integrated. Next slide, please, Brenda. So REDCAN is a local initiative in Colombia that became a global beacon, but beyond the collect data, contributes at all reports and sustainable development goals of the ocean decade, the information support reporting on eutrophication, ocean acidification, and plastics will natural capacities for the SDG management to constantly improve with alliance the projects that strengthens Colombia's capacities to advance and research and data report on nutrient pollution, chemical pollutants, microplastics, algal blooms, global information to a clean ocean and predictable ocean. So, as you know, the ocean decade, in this case, REDCAN evaluate the quality marine coastal water and sources of pollution of the sea, provide relevant information that contributes to the challenge a clean ocean. In this moment, we have a progress to one reporting angular information. So these three types, subtypes to SDG 14 indicators. Next slide, please. So REDCAN in practice, we have 5 topics. For started monitoring frequency is a less one monitoring service per year. It's a huge effort for all the people, the entities, and for INVEMAR and another governments and entities. We have part of all the network. So monitoring station, what I say 300 station with all the coasts on the Caribbean and Pacific, and marine coastal material cities. Parameters, for example, physical, nutrient, microbiology, metal, sediments, and microplastics, add another parameters we have interesting with ocean acidification and others conditions in the sea. We have protocols, standard principle in standard methods. We have one laboratory con so many capacity. We have so many capacities. We the analyze and capacity and the processor data in city and the laboratory. So our capacity we have through defined sustainable station, through 5 sample champions, perform laboratory, report data, relapse technical reports, and across the area the marine environmental quality. And finally, for this reason, this laboratory has become on the marine reference laboratory in Colombia and the region in general when we have a new capacity. Next slide, please. This is a data flow, for example, to environmental management. So the process begins with the field sampling, continues through laboratory analysis and quality control with the need on the report information with analysis and statistic in validates. We have used and data and those indicators. And then some data analysis, reporting, and environmental management, standardizations ensures that results remain flat and they're comparable over time. And finally, for Colombia, producing this data analysis allows us the gain detailed understanding of the marine pollution dynamics, better concept areas, response are reported such as occurred when we see, and advance to develop our capacities in laboratory analysis, data text management, and the preparation of technical report. This workflow ensures that monitoring data are available, consistent, and comparable over time. Of course, only in that moment in Colombia, in the two costs and different types to the process and ecosystem strategies sustainable. Next slide, please, Brenda. For the parameters to make the decision, and individual parameters for SARA 6 at the moment, these typical parameters become much more available than generated into water. In this case, for Colombia, we have one indicator. This is marine coastal water quality index, and this index transfers complex scientific information to a too easy to research tool to support balanced decision. That information generated from REDCAN contributes to the marine environmental quality system. This index was proposed by IMEMAR, by Wildlife, and other countries with the labs project, and also 2 years. Also data generated can respond as sustainable goals. So this indicator, when I can say, with the different how this applies the variables associated with each type. So 2 types, the waters, estuary and marine. For estuaries, the variables include chlorophyll A, and in the case of the marine, we include the hydrocarbons. So individual parameters have little values of their bond. The true value comes from beyond part of the conscious monitoring program and generate relevant information for decision making. So this is an example where transformation of data in this type of the index, we need more information and making decisions. We have really decisions about the recurse resources on the water and the costas. Next slide, please. This is for example, for the results and index in action, for example, what does it show? Marine and coastal water quality monitoring starting during season across the coastal areas in this department in Colombia, in Magdalena. How is the matter? Because we have 64 water quality and 4 stations, for example, and we need discharges on the urban routes in these areas. For management decisions to support health priority in the city was modern management, where there are most need, will protect tourists and for activity, for example. Next slide, please. And so far, because the time is end. And this is the next example results in sanitary water quality reduction at beaches, for example, and annual compilate data because when you see the microbiological water quality indicators and the recreational beaches in this case, one department in Colombia. And what's the matter with threat status for this year after year that beaches such and indicating chronic water quality issues rather than in a settlement. What management decision was the support is a public health advisor during the peak tourist season and evaluated the efficiency of management intervention over time. So this type of the visualization analyze the data to provide information so making decision whatever people what you say data and interpret. Next slide, please. For information to action. And if I wanted to say monitor and regulate census reporting and provide simple national reports. And finally, we have a support environmental management plans of water discussion control strategy, for example, and reports we have need in other strategies, international and national in Colombia. And next slide, please. And finally, this lesson, we have 25 years of the Red Hand Monitoring Network, a long-term continuity in the program's grades, sustainable monitoring rebalance trends and parameters that cannot be identified through its solid sampling events, standardized, harmonized protocols. We have a robust database, we have experience we have, and comparability across and the various data and the years and the regions. Institute collaboration, we have one and other regional environmental authorities here in Colombia, we have 12, and distributed responsibilities to strengthen along the monitoring program. We have a huge, it's a big dream come true. And these are the results. We have the all cooperation, we have permanent per year, and the opportunity to is better and advance and new strategies to cooperation and the opportunities to new activities and variables to the program. Propositive and capacity water quality index. A composed water quality index ICAN index translates complex index information into practical decision-oriented tools for environmental managers. So this is four principles, records, lessons to learn to REDCAN is a huge example to the opportunity to cooperation and generate data with another topics on the region. So this is my final slide, I think. Next, Brenda, I think. Sí.
Yes, thanks, Paola, for your presentation. Thank you very much to all of our speakers for those excellent presentations. And together, they have provided us with both regional context and practical examples of how coastal water quality monitoring supports environmental management across the Caribbean region. And we have now the question and discussion session. We would like to invite the participants to share any questions or comments in the Zoom chat, please, only for the chat. And we will take a moment to allow everyone time to submit their questions.
We have one person who raised their hand. So Leticia, please.
Hi, good morning. And first, I want to say thank you all for this very informative presentation. Thank you to the two presenters. I just wanted to get some information on the accreditation of the labs at INVIMA. I believe Paula had mentioned that some of the protocols would be for standard methods and for ISO. So I'm just checking what accreditation status the labs have.
Okay, thank you, Leticia, for your question. Hara, could you please answer this?
The question is about, it's for me, right, Leticia?
Yeah, it's for you. I can't answer. Basically, the level of accreditation of labs at NBNMAR.
Oh, okay.
Yes, this in my presentation I speak about the accreditation, but this is only for this lab we have in ASOIEC 1605. These are international requirements with the quality parameters.
Hi, I'm not sure I heard you properly. Can you repeat?
Sorry, Leticia. So in INVIMA we have this lab we accredited because we have the international norm with the say in Spanish ISOIEC. This is 1605, and we have technicals about the standard methods for chlorophyll A, analytes, oceans, but and these will discuss laboratory analytical capacities more details when another webinar we have. So specialized chemistry and the people we have spoke about in more detail what is the specific and the parameters we you say interesting, and we have another topics and the more details.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome, Leticia.
We have one more question on the chat from Sheldon Remoter. I don't know if I actually say your last name good. So his question is about it's for Paola, I think. So yes, does ECAM require a fixed set of water quality parameters for all application, or it can be adapted by selecting only the parameters most relevant to a particular study, such as recreational beach water quality? So Paola, can you help us with that question, please?
Okay, Brenda, can you see this live, please, in the presentation, the icon index, and more
Okay,
detail
okay.
about that?
Here?
Yes. Well,
Okay.
thank you. The icon and index, we need 6 parameters for the application. In this case, a OHD, PhD, nutrients, and microbiology, and chlorophyll A for the say in the water's estuary, for example. But we have adapted with select with in that moment is only with this type of the parameters. We have 8 parameters, but we have estimate with 6 parameters for the 2 different types of water. And this moment with another adaptation for the index, we need to recalculate what is the parameters and the formulas with the indicate these 5 categories, for example. And these are a new work to do, and I need the more records we have this type do the analyze information about the with you like adapted and select others parameters most relevant, for example. But in recursional checks, when what you say, and in this case only with where is the oceans and microbiology, in this case at CTA, when you can see in this presentation, in these two types, two marine waters, estuarine or marine. And okay, yes, and the program focuses primarily, and I know, in AC and enterocous, but in this case we use in this indicator of their other types to the parameters. In this case, is no E. coli and enterococci, for example. So this is CTA. That's my my final intervention.
I can maybe pop in here, Mr. Amatar. There are a number of various types of indices, right? And if I'm understanding correctly, our colleagues at NVNMAR, they developed this one, right, for their particular purposes. I'm not sure if anybody else is using this one. Maybe they are now, like over so many years of you guys doing this type of work. But there are a number of other indices. And I think you probably could design your own. But as far as I know, the main sort of, and it sort of goes back to the kind of what we were saying is that it's going to be most useful when you have a fairly long data set, so that you can really determine the pattern, right? But there are a number of indices out there. I could probably do a little bit of research and find out if there's one that would suit well with the data that you have. But yeah. I mean, indices are very helpful, right? Because you get this one number. It's very helpful for, especially for policymakers, you know, if you need to and to be able to let the public know, you know, what's happening. It's very often very helpful to have a color-coded system and one index, but they're really only they're useful mostly when you have very long data sets.
And also, I want to add something to this regarding this question. Yes, like the Hello were saying, this index was built here in Colombia with help with some other countries. In this case, if I remember good, this was made with Ecuador and one more countries that I don't remember completely. And I know that right now, other countries, in this case, Chile, is trying to like replicate the ICANN index for their waters. So it's only like more information that this can be applied for any environment, but this need to change like environmental variables that you want to add.
Hello. You're hearing me?
Yeah, sure. You want to make an intervention?
Oh yes, perfect. Yes, I love the idea of the indices because the issue I have is that sometimes some parameters would be over a limit and some will be under a limit. So the fact that you have an indices that could incorporate all these parameters and give it a ranking makes it really good. Really, it sounds like it's really good way forward.
Thank you so much, Sheldon. We really appreciate that you see that this type of indexes are really good and it's actually easy to apply. So really thank you for your intervention. I know that we have like one more question on the chat that is from Samantha da Silva about the copy of all of this information for your records. I will say that all of this information, like all the presentation, will be shared on YouTube, so all the people can see the information. And also I want to add that we are planning to give certificates to those who attend at least 80% of the webinar series. So only for your information too. And I think, yes.
And there is another from Cloneshama.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. If it is possible to have a copy of the webinar recording, it's like the same.
Yeah, it's the same, Felicia. Thank you so much for the question again. And yes, like the copy of the presentation will be like on YouTube. Like we will let you know like what all of the information of the webinar will be on the YouTube channel. But so far, thank you so much for
Yeah,
participating
and
today.
if I could pop in here, I mean, under this project, we're also developing a sort of online learning platform, learning management system they call the LMS. And so a lot of our work here in these webinars will, some of them will sort of get wrapped into sort of self-paced online courses. And so, you would be able to access this for free. And we would, of course, in this webinar series, keep everybody up to date as to when the LMS launches, but the information won't be lost. I would like to just let you know that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for your questions and for the excellent discussion. While we wait to see if there are any additional questions, I would like to share any final reflections or recommendations based on today's presentations, like a key message. So before we close today's session, I would like to highlight a few key messages that emerge from today's presentation. Start with a limited number of monitoring stations, but maintaining them consistently over time. So long-term continuity is more valuable or maybe more important than broad initial coverage. Second, standardized monitoring protocols from the outset to ensure data are comparable across years, institutions, and countries. It's like standardized monitoring protocols to make this, for example, SOCAR report or SOCAR framework. Standardized monitoring protocols from the outset to ensure data are comparable. Finally, use simple and easy to interpret indicators, such as our water quality indices, to better communicate results to decision makers. And finally, we have that and a strong interinstitutional collaboration as long-term monitoring programs depend on these partnerships rather than individual projects. So it's better like programs that in the time is more long. And like a final recommendation, individual parameters have limited value on their own. They become meaningful when integrated into a consistent monitoring program that generates evidence to support informed decision making. And this is the first webinar in our regional capacity development program. We are pleased to announce that additional sessions will follow over the coming months. Future webinars will cover topics such as file and laboratory monitoring methods, data management and interpretation, pollution assessment and management responses, providing opportunities for continued learning and regional knowledge exchange. We hope you will be able to join us in the upcoming sessions, and we will have two sessions. The first is the last Thursday of each month, the Spanish sessions, and the English sessions, like today, the last Friday of each month. So before we conclude, we would like to ask for one final favor. We would like to ask you to complete a short evaluation pool that has just appeared on your screen, I hope. You should now see a short evaluation pool on your screen. And we would really appreciate if you could take just a couple of minutes to answer the questions before leaving the webinar. Your feedback is extremely important for us. It will help us to understand how useful today's session was, whether the level of technical content was appropriate, and how we can continue providing future webinars. So we are also very interested in learning about the topics, technical questions, and country-level challenges that you would like us and in future webinars and technical driving clinics. Okay. Thank you for this time to share your feedback. It's so important for us.
The paper.
It only went for 3 minutes. Was that enough time for most people to answer, or would you like me to launch it again? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, please.
Yes, we need more time, Hala, please.
More
Yeah.
time, please.
I didn't
Yes,
set it seemed to be, yeah. Let me launch again. There we go. But if you've already answered, of course, thank you so much.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
I have one question as we're waiting for others to complete the poll.
Yes,
that's-
Leticia, go ahead.
Yes, so I just wanted to find out if there was anything put in place to address some of the issues raised with the fact that with some of the issues raised from the last SOCA, so like the different monitoring methodologies and inconsistent analytical methods, etc. So if there has been any guidance for persons who would be participating and submitting data for the upcoming SOCA in terms of a more consistent approach.
Thank you so much for your question, Leticia. I don't know if Hala, I will start, and if you want to compliment me, yes, please stop me when you want. Okay, so actually, yes, this project is the main focus of this project is to try to give the capacities to the countries, and also one of the part of the project is to try to help the countries to standardize some of the methods. So that is one of the main focus. So one of the problems that we have with the LASO card is that the methodologies are not standardized. So for this reason, this is one of the main goal of this project and this webinars is also to give this information to the people. The second thing that I want to add is that right now we are building the new framework, the new methodologies and everything for this new report. So for that reason, one of the things that are that we're thinking how to teach to the people how to upload the data, organize the data, and send the data is one of the parts that we gonna provide in the next webinar, and also it's gonna be part of the activities, the capacity building activities that we are working right now. So Hala, I give you the word if maybe I forgot something.
Yeah, no, you described this very nicely. So Leticia, this there's a working group that's dedicated to this new integrated SOCAR. And you can imagine that it's a process that takes a few years. But they've started the work, and they're doing work now on the sort of conceptual framework and the methodology, for the next integrated SOCAR, which will be the next iteration. And so the working group is working on this now. I mean, there may even be some additional indicators that are different. I mean, I think the core indicators will remain, but they're also going to be looking at anything that's changed over the last 5, 6, 7 years, and may adjust some of the indicators as well. And of course, some of this work is towards harmonization. We know this is a sort of long-term goal, but like Maria Jose just said, we're really hoping that through what we do as part of this webinar series and the kind of larger project with the scalable projects is to move closer and closer to this goal of the sort of more harmonized way of collecting and analyzing the information. Thanks. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for the response.
And we have another question from Sheldon. Will a new link be sent every week, or do we use same ID and password every week to log in? Is the same ID and the same password for every webinar for the upcoming session?
So when you registered, as far as I understand, when you registered just once for the webinar series, and you should receive, it's going to be the same link, and you should receive a reminder email a day or two before the next one. But we'll also be sharing this through our network and the social media accounts of ENVI-NMAR and the Cartagena Convention. So hopefully those also remind you. I encourage you to download the sort of calendar invite, and I think it would populate all the dates into your calendar as well. But yeah, it's the same link, same passcode.
Okay, and before we finally conclude, we hope this session has provided useful knowledge, practical ideas, and inspiration for your own work. We look forward to welcoming you again in our coming webinars. Thank you once again for joining us, and have a wonderful day, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinars.